you've lost a part of yourself. Then you've got to earn money, but you don't have a skill set. Like, hey, can you pay me for riding a bike well? No, we did pay you for riding a bike well. Now you're deciding you're not going to do that. So what's your skill set? And then the next morning, Danny's, how you doing? And dude, I can't believe you rode with Pastrana. I was like, I did what? I rode with who? For me to sit here and not say that I had prima donna tendencies, or I wanted a special tire, or I threw my toys out the cot because they didn't have 3 backup tires of my choice. I'm thinking, you know, it would have been better.
Andrew Neethling, athlete, ambassador, commentator, and fellow podcaster. You're a busy man, amongst other things as well, I think. Thanks for making some time to join us on the show. How's things?
Anytime, man. I'm honored to get an invite. I've followed your show for a long time, and it's part of the inspiration that a podcast was in the mountain bike industry. So that's pretty cool. Athlete, strong use of the word, but I did clock some training yesterday, and I've done a test because I might end up at Mega Avalanche for a project, but I decided survival would mean I need to do a bit of training. Not to win, not to excel, but to survive 50 minutes with my little arms after taking such a long break of structured training would probably be a good idea. So yeah, nice. I can call myself an athlete again. That's pretty cool.
That's good. Have you done Mega Avalanche before?
I did back in the day. I've done the one in Alpe d'Huez. It was awesome. And then I also went to Reunion Island with a former teammate, Eric Carter.
Yeah.
We called ourselves a professional snorkeling team because all we did was practice and then straight to the sea, which we didn't know at the time. There was kind of a few warnings, or at least a year or two after, with shark attacks. But we were just driving down the freeway, or highway for me, freeway for the Yanks. And me and EC were like, let's just go jump in the ocean there and scuba a bit or snorkel. So Mega Avalanche I've done. I always say, I don't know how you think about it, but I think any core gravity-fed mountain biker should tick the Mega Avalanche off.
It's a pretty special event.
It is, right? There's just something about mass start downhill and the chaos that ensues, you know, and it's so different to downhill enduro. It's a time trial. This is sort of the complete opposite.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been as nervous as being on that start grid on the glacier at some ridiculous time in the morning with like French techno, helicopter flying above filming it. It was, like a wild experience. But equally, like, I think anyone could do it. It's not like super gnarly. It's just crazy, right?
Yes, people have seen the videos of the carnage on the glacier, and even the wife was like, I've seen those videos. Is this the smartest thing to do in your age, she likes to call it. I'm like, no, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable there to stay out of trouble. But I think, if you're conservative through the glacier, anyone could do it. It's kind of a downhill version of a cross-country race. If you feel like you want to pass the guy and you got more speed, try get past him if he lets you, or grab him on a flat or the uphill. But super unique event, and I do hope this project comes off so we get to go back.
Yeah, sweet, man. I look forward to seeing how you get on. What test did you do yesterday then?
It was a gentleman I've connected with, which you might know, Jamie Reed. We've just been chatting, and he is a very fascinating guy. I don't want to butcher, but he's doing a PhD in what sounds like sort of performance in downhill and mountain biking. So I've connected him to another old coach of mine, Alan, and they've had crazy chats. So he's kind of not debunking, but we were chatting a lot about what I struggled with in the past in my racing, and how my body makeup and how I deal with lactic acid. And I said a few things, and he then said, well, to get a better idea, you got to do this test. So he said, okay, cool. So you got a power meter, you got a heart rate monitor. I said, Jamie, dude, I sold all that stuff. Like, that is a thing of the past. I haven't looked at a heart rate monitor in 8 years. I don't even have one, let alone these Wahoo smart kickers. So off I went and got one borrowed and got my Lycra on, and, forgot to put a towel on the ground because I forgot you sweat so much indoors. And all we did was doing this sort of test that he can assess my body composition, and we go from there. But I'll definitely dig a bit deeper into it. I'm basically said, why don't I become a guinea pig so I have more knowledge? I really was into it when I was training 8 years ago. I was into wattage and all this and lactic this, and Alan Mill would be at the finish of the downhill, and we got pretty high tech into it. But anyway, so back loosely training a bit.
Good on you, man. Good on you. Well, we'll talk a bit about training actually as we get through this, but I want to wind the clock back, as we do with most people the first time they come on the show, and just get some background. So just tell us a little bit about growing up and how bikes come into your life, because I think we're a similar age where mountain bikes probably weren't around initially when we started to learn to ride bikes, but then probably came at a really good time when we were starting to discover hobbies and see other fun things to do with being outdoors.
Yeah, it was a very unique sport, especially in South Africa, access to equipment and, even knowledge of the sport. And my late father and his sort of cycling crew, they did this famous road race called the Cape Argus. It's still, I think, the biggest one-day amateur road race. There's 35 to 40,000 participants, and you go off in different batches, right? So that was very popular. So my dad did a bunch of road riding, and our family friends were Erica Green at the time, now Groenewold, and her husband. Anyway, and the reason I bring that's the context. So she went to Olympics twice for cross country. And that's quite a feat to do as a South African, to make it, especially in cross country overseas. So he was mountain biking a bit on the weekends. And as kids, you probably want to hang out with your dad a bunch. And he started taking us after their training ride on a Sunday. We'd go for a little cheeky mountain bike ride. So he got us into it as young kids. My brother and myself would go riding with my dad and some of his friends that were sort of at the forefront of mountain biking in the country. Not my dad. I mean, he definitely didn't break any records, the poor guy. He was a bigger man. He always said the jumping's not the problem, but the landing sure is. And that was kind of his mountain bike career. But he was good. No, he did got provincial, did pretty decent as a vet. And that's the context, and then us kids being youngsters, we're starting off at, I think my brother was 11 and I was maybe 13. We do our first downhill race in our town at the very mountain that I'm kind of helping with the trails now. We've got a trail center and a bike park. So it's come full circle. So when you're kids and you're left to your own devices, it's like kids with BMXs. You want to build jumps and you want to do all that stuff. You're not fussed with pedaling up hills and training and all that. And that's where the downhill thing, we forced my dad to go to downhill races with us and all that.
Amazing. Yeah, it was racing an obvious thing, because you've got a brother, Jonty. Is he older or younger?
He's 2 years younger.
Okay.
And he did the first downhill race in the family, I think just before me. He did one maybe when he was 11 and I did the cross country. And then maybe the next phase of races, we sort of did both. Racing was really all you did because there wasn't bike parks, there weren't trail centers. And thinking back, trail centers and bike parks are incredible. But in our country, they're almost killing racing because that's where you went to ride good trails. You helped build the trails, and that was where the core skilled mountain bikers hung out, was at a downhill race.
Yeah, definitely. It is changing in that respect. So racing for you was quite a family thing, certainly initially, right? So you've got your brother and you. I guess there's a natural competition. There always is between siblings. But it was your mum and dad that were kind of getting you on the road and taking you to all these events, which in South Africa, they can be quite a long way away from where you live, right?
Yeah, you might have done some research, but they definitely can. Some of the races were up where Greg Minnaar lives, in Pietermaritzburg, where the World Cup has been. And we live down south. As you know, Cape Town, Somerset West, it's where Greg goes to relax and go on holiday. I just want to put it out there. So if there's a competition between towns, just going to put it out there. But no, Maritzburg is amazing for mountain biking. But it was, I feel 17 hours in the car. And because we're a family and you got to take bikes and spares, it's bikes on the back of a trailer. My dad doing a full day's work, coming home, checking the bikes on order, but he's probably done that already because he was organized. Pack the trailer, mom's packing the cooler box, and we jump in the car and we drive through the night. And we get there sort of midday the next day. No idea. I mean, you just, as kids, you're so naive to what your parents are doing, especially at a young age. And looking back, it's just absurd what they were doing. And we'd get there, walk the track. Mom would have the cooler box out. My dad would have the bike stand out, toolbox, and everyone started knowing my dad. Like if there was a problem and other riders maybe weren't so fortunate to have a dad with a toolbox like him, or they didn't have parents at that race, he was kind of the team mechanic. So it was a really family environment as well as with the races, and we'd do track walk and then we'd practice, we'd race. And on Sunday, often he'd drive through the night and get back to work for Monday. So yeah, it was a complete family affair, you know.
Yeah, that's incredible what parents have given to get you where you got. Were you aware then when it shifted? Because I'm guessing you started out doing this because it's fun and the racing as well, probably from a fun perspective. But can you put your finger on when it started to shift from being something you did with the family for fun at a weekend to something maybe a little bit more serious, where there's perhaps like a future or maybe, you know, a career path or opportunities in the sport?
Yeah, there's definitely a few funny stories. And right in the beginning, people would come up to my dad and mom and say, you need to get more protective gear. These kids are going too fast for their own good. And that's just ignorant young kids, you know. But then I think when I got selected to go to World Champs, and back then juniors were allowed to go 3 years as juniors, and it was an Olympic year. So this race was in June in Sierra Nevada, June or July. So I'm going over there as a 15-year-old.
Wow.
I can't tell you how exciting it was. You know, I can still remember a lot of the fun stuff we got up to, and Greg Minnaar's there, and he comes over to the team because he's homesick. So he comes, has dinner, and off we go on a Wednesday night as a 15-year-old in Spain. There's not a lot of rules up in the mountain, and off we are. I think we went up to a pub. But getting to where it got serious, you know, then you're meeting all your idols. You're watching them race down the seal. You're racing the very same race, and you're looking at these factory rigs. And I think that's probably the spark. I was like, okay, if you do this right, this is an actual career. So I think there was that spark back then as a 15-year-old going to World Champs. And then you set your goals to something like that, but you're from South Africa. So you don't have the means to get to more international races, let alone the funding. So you got to wait each year to go to World Champs. So all I'm doing is pushing myself against the elites at home, and luckily excelling and beating a lot of the elites. And that's where you probably think, okay, you know, maybe there's some potential here. If there's some of these elites are going to World Champs and getting 50th, 60th, but I'm ahead of them. And then last year as a junior was in Kaprun, Austria. It's an unbelievable course right from the top. I think it's the famous one of the famous one where Volio's just pipped PD. PD's in the hot seat for so long, and Volio's wins that one. And, you know, I'm racing against guys like Mark Beaumont. You might know that name.
Yeah.
Julian Camillini, a lot of the Aussies. And these guys got over to more races. Some of them were qualifying at World Cups already. And I set myself a goal of top 10. And somehow I reached that. I could be wrong. I feel like I got 9th. So I don't even know, you know. And that's when you're like, okay, I've got less experience. It's harder for me to get over here. And then you go to Leger World Cup finals.
Because you're in Europe, right?
Yeah, because we're in Europe. So we do a race before Worlds. Luckily, my dad had enough people in the corner to say, look, if you're going to go over, you're going to spend all that money, do a race before. So we did a Swiss Cup, and then we did Worlds, and then we did Leger, and I qualified 78th as a junior. And that's luckily because we were allowed 80 right back then.
Yeah.
And I snapped things into place. I think I was obviously so nervous and got in, and then I finished 50th, first World Cup. I mean, we're talking Sam Hill probably in the top 10. I don't know, we should probably research it. But I'm thinking, you know, 50th for a World Cup, that's not bad as a junior, first World Cup. So I think those sort of marks of that there is potential to do this, it started getting serious. But I think where it got serious for my dad, and this is a great story. Now, I've told on some podcasts, my dad's not around anymore, and I'm happy to talk about it because we've got these great memories. He always used to say to me and my brother, and it's come up on a few podcasts, you two boys have more talent in your little pinky than I've got in my entire body. He didn't care if we win or lose, but he was like, don't squander the talent, because he's obviously seen it and people told us. And he could see how we were riding these bikes. And I had an 18th birthday mid-year at home, and some friends thought they would be smart, so they took me out to the local mall, and there's a pub, and they lined up shots on the table midweek, school night. And my parents obviously gave us free rein if we didn't cause too much trouble. I think they went out for dinner. They said, okay, it's your 18th, it's midweek, you can go out with your friends. And they just forced too many shots down. And I'll never forget this. I came home and I didn't keep the shots down, and parents came home and I was puking everywhere. And obviously it was hell to pay for this. And it wasn't because I went drinking. It was because we had a national the very next weekend. And my dad woke me up the next morning and says, "You're off to school." I was like, "I can't get out of bed. No, I don't care, you're going to school." I couldn't eat or drink anything till the second break, whatever you have at school. I was a mess. And I'm not proud of it, but it was a big lesson. And obviously, I think he could see the potential and the talent in his boys. And as we said, imagine the effort they're putting in.
Yeah.
Now I'm pissing up as a now newly 18-year-old midweek, and we got a national coming up. I got to that national. I don't know if subtly I wanted to prove him wrong, or I just excelled at the track, but like I won by a winning margin at the time. So I'm super proud of that, and it's just like a good memory and a lesson that he was trying to instill in us. Is don't piss it away. He didn't care if we won. He just cared, like, we put effort in, we appreciated the bikes and the effort the parents were putting in.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think I've heard you say in the past, like, a lot of your work ethic comes from your parents. Like, they were happy to help, but they needed to see that you were and your brother were willing to put in the graft and put in the work and use the talent that you have, I guess.
Yeah, I think looking back now, you must subconsciously, as a teenager, understand how much effort they're putting in. You know, my dad, as you can hear, is quite an inspiration to me, because he's you could say just a pharmacist, right? But that takes a lot of work to do a trade like that. There's a lot of schooling. But he also was doing these races for us, and then he got his commissaire's license, or whatever you call it, accreditation.
Yeah.
And he's been to Olympics, he's been to Commonwealth Games, and he's done 1 million of these nationals in South Africa on top of a full-time job. So he would take unpaid leave to go then work. Just think about that. But it wasn't for the money, it was for the experience. And then he also went to Ciora a bunch of years. And I don't know if the pros are going to Ciora at the moment, this year and in the past, as much as they used to.
It used to be a big deal, right?
Yeah, and my dad would take unpaid leave. Yeah, he'd go earn some dollars. But like, honestly, he was doing it before I was there. And then when I went over, I think as an excuse to be at a race. So he'd graft for 2 weeks, at this race, helping with the downhill course and bunting and God knows what else. Yeah, so it's cool actually going down memory lane, Chris, because, I think you subconsciously can see the work ethic that your parents have, and it doesn't come out of nothing, So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. So, how did you eventually end up in the US then? Because obviously, like you've alluded to, being from South Africa, it's a long way to get to where most of the racing's happening. The track kind of, gradient challenge is probably higher in most of the World Cup venues than it would be in South Africa. Maybe Peter Maritzburg is the exception, but like it's key, and I think Greg showed that as well. Like, it's key to get out of South Africa. So how do you make that happen as a young and upcoming rider? You've had this show of potential, I guess, in your last World Champs as a junior and your first World Cup, but how do you convert that into actually getting to the US?
Well, I mean, I think there were a rider or two before Greg on the downhill side that raced overseas, and Greg going so early, not finishing school and campaigning in England, you could see you needed that experience. So that was the next goal. And lucky enough, I met Sven and Anke quite early, and they had a bit of connections in the States. So that was the next question mark. Okay, so you don't get a ride for getting 50th at a World Cup, even though you're a junior. And doing heel clickers at the duel in Leger doesn't get you a ride either. But that was the next question mark. How do we get there? And I had these contacts in the States, and it sounded like they would maybe help house me in between races, and we're going to have to self-fund this thing. So, and then luck came my way because the global racing team sort of was downscaling because of funding. That Martin Whiteley had a 3-year deal, whatever it was, and then the last year they pulled the funding. But he didn't want to lose the team. He thought if he ran the team for another year, then something else would come, and good move by him because he's on the circuit. I think Honda came. So I think my dad had a call into Greg. Now you can imagine how excited I am that my dad's going to call Greg Minnaar. Like, yeah, I've met him at a national too, but we're not phoning each other like we do now, talking a bunch of bollocks. And I remember I think I rode my road bike to his work because I wanted to be there while he speaks to him, And then it was either that or one of the photographers, Gary Perkins, that said, let me connect you with Martin or something. So I don't know how it all happened, but we got an email into Martin or a call with him. So thanks. I don't remember it fully. I don't know if it was Perkins, good word, maybe Greg as well. And Martin gave us a call and an email about he doesn't have funding to provide a full team, but what he can do is he can get bikes, he can get support. You'll be on the team, and you kind of take care of your own stuff, and then he can help when he brings Maddie and at the time maybe Cesar Rojo, who's designed Mondraker and now that other brand. So that was that. And when he came to Canada, I could stay with him, we'd be on the team, and then world champs and a European round at the end of the year. So, man, dude, that was a lottery ticket. If I tell you going to the Norbers, which were big back then in America, with the help of Sven and Anke and beg, borrowing, stealing, making friends, hitching rides. But luckily you go to Michelin, we're sponsored by Michelin. Hi, I'm Andrew Neethling. Sorry, who? No, I'm on Global. They're like, oh yeah, bring your bike in. Yeah, we'll sort it out. So then you start making relations, same as SRAM. First time I meet the guys at SRAM, it's because luckily I was on Global, so we were sponsored by them. And then, I learned quickly to go thank them with beers. And they probably felt sorry for this lonely South African. The late Monktog. Dude, the list goes on people that have helped me. So that was the lottery ticket, is getting on support from Global Racing, Martin Whiteley, in that first year. But I was on my own, working my own bike, got a bit of support. They changed my tires. That was it. Suspension maybe got serviced, but yeah, that was me over in America doing all the Norbers, which were big back then. Even back then, 2003, PD would come to some, Cedric, all the Aussies, Rennie, Kovarik, Sam Hill. I mean, if you could get on a podium at a World Cup Norber, easily was as good as a World Cup.
Yeah, it was huge back then, eh? Like, how did you make it work then? Because there must have been sacrifices to make, because you're living on a super tight budget and everything costs money, right? Like, going to a gym costs money, eating well costs money. Like, how do you make all of that work as a full private, well, not a privateer, I guess, but very limited support, no income from the racing?
Yeah, I think luckily gym wasn't as important back then, or at least the knowledge of it wasn't as important. So we just dirt jumped, rode XC on our dirt jump bikes and downhill, and but how did I make it work? I mean, I think I went over with $500, and luckily my dad in the background helped with some race entries. Sven and Anke were amazing, but I mean, I was eating 2-minute noodles and mac and cheese out of a box, and luxury was putting a can of tuna with the thing, and McDonald's burgers because they were cheap, so that's $1 for a burger. Then you go ask for a water cup, and you get Sprite, because it looks like sparkling water. So it was great, dude. I mean, it was, I mean, you just make it work, don't you? But you ever grounded tiles in your life?
No.
I don't suggest anyone gets into it. It's hard, tough work. It's not good on the knees, especially for a guy that's trying to pedal. So there were odd jobs, Sven and Anke were really hard workers as well. Anke had jobs in between their racing. Sven had his photography and riding and working at bike shops. So I did they hooked me up with some friends that were contractors. I did grouting tiles. So we just made it work, man. Beg, borrow, and steal, living on couches, and off you went. It was some of the best times, but I luckily got hooked up So speaking of that, so there was a race in Fontana, and Gwyn's quite famous for speaking about this race.
Mm-hmm.
Really awesome guys that put on this race series out in Fontana in California. Horrible pedaling section, not a big mountain, but some of the greats have raced there. And we went to practice because you could walk, you kind of shuttled a bit and then you walk to the top. Pretty inexpensive day. The race is the next day. I didn't have money for the race, so I didn't go to the race. But the Aussies had seen me the day before, so they asked Sven, "Where's this kid? Like, he seemed good. Like, where is he?" No, he decided not to race. I couldn't afford the entry fee, and it wasn't a priority. And then, luckily, Sven, being Sven, kind of said, "Well, what are you guys up to?" "No, we're going to Big Bear because the team's got a condo up there," and they invited me along, and the rest is history. So I got taken
cool,
under the wing by Nathan Rennie, Jared Grace, Bryn Atkinson, and Sam Hill. Whether that's a good or a bad thing.
A bit of both, I guess.
We went up to Big Bear for a month, and I learned to train or ride my bike. I learned to ride downhill with those guys.
And learned to party.
Certainly did. Certainly did. There was work hard, play hard. But Rennie got a bad rep, but he lived on his bike. I mean, if we weren't dirt jumping, then we were downhilling. If we weren't downhilling, we probably went for a spin on our jump bikes with a seat up. He was a strong individual, but we did. I mean, that day and age, and when you're young, you definitely learn to play hard and work hard.
Fair play. And you topped up the bank account with some spot prizes as well, right? They used to occasionally have like best jump or whatever at a race, and you'd almost focus on that rather than the race result. Yep.
You've dug into definitely one of my fondest stories. Durango, I think it's Norba finals. So I'd had a little bit of success, which you mustn't forget to tell the story. Sorry for some of the listeners that heard it, but Durango, what Chris was talking about, I'm going to Europe. I don't even know if I have money. Obviously, I got my dad and mom's support, or they're remortgaging their house at the stage to pay in the USDs. And someone comes up with best trick or something on a jump, and they're going to have it during qualifying. So you can imagine no pro is thinking this is a good idea. It's qualifying of a Norba, So Sam Hill, all those boys, I'm thinking, well, this is a great idea. I'm hill clicking this thing. And it was a $500 prize or something. So here I come in qualifying. Hill clicker, some crap jump going into the woods, over jump this jump. So I get the hill clicker, I land, but I'm carrying way too much space into the woods, so I wad it going into the woods in my qualifying run. But I won the cash. So
there you go.
I think there was that, and maybe some of the. I think I went to Europe with $1,000 in my pocket, and not a good qualifying result. But I'd already
it's gotta be done.
Yeah, but another funny one. So this is when skin suits was still a thing. So Martin Whiteley insisted we ride skin suits. I think a few guys were still doing it, so I don't know if I really pushed back at all. And I do think skin suits for that time when they were at Worlds were pretty cool. 1C at Worlds was cool. So I'm in this skin suit, and I've qualified. So granted, this is the first year in the States. Qualified 4th at Vermont. This is a gnarly track. Horribly gnarly. It's wet. It's a lot of slab rocks out in the open, ski runs. It's unbelievable. Now at the top of the track. And it's eerie at the top. So quiet. First time I qualified this well. And sponsors, John Cancelier from SRAM. He ran Black Box for a while. And I don't know if Dawson was also there. So these are big SRAM guys that I'm trying to impress. And top third of this track, I'm hurtling down this track. I didn't feel too nervous, but I don't know if they sort of shouted and I just sort of lost concentration. And I just clipped something. It went flying over the bars in front of these guys in a skin suit at Vermont. So carcass down, and then I get up. Now I've crashed in front of these guys and I've ruined my race run. I could have just probably cruised down and got a top 10. That would have been an incredible result first year over. So I've managed to wad in front of these sponsors, and then I managed to get a flat tire even further down. So, yeah, you bring back some good memories.
Good stuff, man. And you mentioned earlier Eric Carter, but he was quite a bit of a mentor to you, right? And was he instrumental in helping you get like a first salary deal?
Definitely. Eric Carter, I owe a lot to him, and I just think he's one of the better guys that have come through the industry. He really has. And he was on Mongoose at the time, and this was my third year over. And look, the challenge is, as a South African, the industry's in America, so they're going to back Americans first. I don't think it's wrong or right. It's pretty natural. And that year, I'd got 2 top 10s in a World Cup, one in Brazil, one in Angel Fire, and something else. I don't know if that's when I won the Norber. I thought I'd already had to do that. It wasn't, okay, we saw him qualify 4th. We've seen him get a top 10 at a Norber the year before. Let's see what this potential's like. I had to go out and win a Norber. I had to go out and get the top 10s. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't bitter or resentful. And I remember EC calling me into the truck and saying, look, Mongoose is looking to add to their downhill program. And what do you think? I mean, it was amazing. It was really cool. The only ship part was at EC the next year. We go to Vigo in Spain. And EC was going to do maybe 4-cross only and a bit of downhill. Shame, and he hurt his back first race. And from then he was pretty riddled with injuries. So he wasn't on the race circuit as much as I would have loved. But he was a really good mentor. I loved his attitude towards racing. Always having a good time, but incredibly hard worker.
Yeah, it must have felt good then to finally step it up to have an income and not have to be, and I'm guessing it wasn't a huge income at that point, but like not to have to be going for the heel clicker to get the $500 to go to Europe kind of thing.
No, it was amazing. It really was. Look, those years were awesome. They were fun. I wouldn't take them back. They sort of taught me to appreciate things and everything else. But to get that factory ride, and I'll tell you, as a youngster, you just scroll straight down to the salary. I didn't look at the T's and C's. I just opened the email, and I knew Bryn back then, and I think he was on GT already, so I kind of had a guesstimate of what you could make. And I just scroll straight down. But the more important part was the mechanic, the support, housing, that whole structure. I mean, that's what you dream for. And that's what you need, to consistently perform at that level.
Yeah, definitely. And at that point, I think like not only was the sport progressing, but the understanding and the appreciation and the adoption of training was kind of becoming more of a thing in the sport as well. I think we'd seen maybe Nico, G, athletes like that taking that side a bit more seriously. And this is where, again, your work ethic kind of crept into things and you took a pretty serious approach to that. Can you talk to us a bit about how you got into training and like how you went away and got the support that you needed? Because I think that's quite interesting. And you've worked with a few of the sports greats from that side of thing over the years.
Yeah, myself, as you've said, maybe subconsciously building work ethic back in the day, but understanding and watching, these family friends, Erica go to the Olympics and then her transition into coaching. So through my dad or her sort of offering it, I had help training as a youngster. Obviously, bike time, anyone listening that's young, I think bike time and skill development is the most critical in the beginning, but because there will become time to train and it will become a career and a job. But luckily I had that, and I just use it to build confidence. I like to know I'm doing everything I can. I tick that box and then we can go to the races. So quite early on, I was always asking, who's training who, what's going on. And I think early on, Scott Sharples, the great Aussie downhiller, was training some of these Aussies. Now, I couldn't afford that. But luckily for me, someone like Scott Sharples was willing to engage with me, and I asked him, and he was willing to help me out for some parts and a fork or whatever, we bartered that. I remember instilling sort of that quite early on. So someone like Scott Sharples, and then things got a lot more serious, and I heard of Stefan Gerard, who I think Greg still works with on the physical cardio side, and then he's added Alan Milway. So I was like, well, if he's coaching the best download of all time in Nico at the time, and then Greg, like what does that cost, and can I do it? Like, why not try that? So I've kind of forgotten about that. But I've always wanted to have a coach, and some people do it without, someone like Graves, someone like Lopes, but I used to doubt if I'm doing the right thing. Like, I don't want to overtrain. I don't want to undertrain. Like, how do you know? And it wasn't a passion of mine to learn the intricacies of how the body exactly works at that stage. Yeah.
Yeah. And you
so
were
yeah,
quite,
I employed, sorry?
I was going to say, you were quite structured about it, right? Like if it was on the plan, it got done.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when there were sprints on the plan. I don't know, if chain fell off or it snapped at the jumps. I'm on my own, smashed my chin into the ground. And luckily we had phones at that stage, so I took a photo of my chin. I was like, well, if I need stitches, I probably got to go get that done. But if I don't need stitches, I'm going to finish the training program. So, yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I guess I'm just sort of kind of a fixer and a problem solver and quite organized. Like my stuff somewhat in a fashion. Like if my inbox has 33 emails, it drives me a little mad, you know. I'll leave the tax one, you know, that one can be unread. But there's shit to get done. I like to get it done so then I can get on with my day. And that was the training. I like to get up early, knock it out, know that I've worked my ass off. Because then lying on the couch, recovering, lack of a better term, feels way better.
Yeah, and that's a big part of being a good athlete, right? I think a lot of people underestimate the power of good recovery. Like I think it was Chris Kilmurray that said to me, to be able to turn on, you've got to be able to turn off, which is quite a good way to look at things, I think, and often missed by people.
Definitely. I like his work, and I think he's got also quite a big holistic approach to things, which that would be, you know, what that is, energy of athletes. And so I really like his work as well. He's a fascinating guy to chat to, and I couldn't agree more. You know, sometimes less is more. Sometimes you need a break from training. Sometimes you need a break from your downhill bike. Sometimes, you know, every athlete's different, but yeah, understanding that recovery is equally important. And you spoke to it. Back in the day, there was it was more hidden. You know, I had to dig, who's training Greg? Like now you just know, right? There's enough podcasts, you've heard it. Oh, cool, he's added Alan Milway. But back then, it was this hidden thing of the sport, like Sean Palmer, right? This whole partying, drinking, craziness thing. It's bullshit because it was show. He didn't do it the night before the race, really. Maybe here and there. But that was a dedicated, fit individual that had a party showmanship. And that was back in the day. Now, people are building confidence, I think, from showing that they're working the hardest, showing themselves in the gym. You know, whether they're keeping sponsors happy or just trying to get in another athlete's head. I think, you know, there's kind of smoke and mirrors to the training aspect now.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it used to be people almost seemed embarrassed to admit they trained, right? Like you wouldn't have thought you'd see it. But then I remember as a kid seeing Petey and Warner ride past on road bikes and I was just like, huh? Really? Like those guys go on road bikes and train? Like it was just so hidden back then, eh?
Yeah, what do you think of that? You're totally right. It was when downhill mountain bike was trying to find itself and get away from Lycra and wear the moto kit, you know, and it wasn't cool to be on the road bikes. It wasn't cool. You were downhill, you're a rock star. You party and then you hurtle down the hill and you party some more. I guess they were trying to build a brand out of the sport. So it has progressed a lot to be taken seriously. Like these are some of the most fit individuals to do what they do. Even though you're only racing down a hill for 2 to 5 minutes, people on the street don't understand how fit you need to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I guess it was shown that it worked, right? We saw athletes that looked different. Like G was a machine. Oh, well, still is a machine. But like, I think once people saw that worked, there was more of a willingness to be like, okay, maybe we need to do that as well. And as everyone's doing it, it becomes less kind of geeky, I guess, and more accepted maybe.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. There was an awesome phase where skill and grit and bike time was able to compete with maybe the structured guys. And now you've got you got skill, you got grit, you've got living on a bike since you were 2 years old like Jackson. He's only going to get stronger. He's only going to get forced to train more, you know. And he's going up against Greg, who's super experienced and has been one of the fittest guys undercover for so long. And against Loic, Amri. I mean, that guy's a beast. That guy's strong. The Prella, those guys are machines.
Yeah, it's insane. All the boxes
Well,
need ticking these days.
I guess Gwyn sort of showed like what brute force on a course could do, like being able to hang on a really tough course versus a skill like Sam Hill. He was fit, but he just had the skill to get down fast. And then Gwyn kind of said, well, I'm going to straight line everything, even if it's not the smoothest line. If I can hang on, I'm going to make track speed.
Yeah, no, it's been super interesting to see how that changed. And over the time, you've ridden for like a good number of teams. So you've spent some time with Global, Mongoose, Honda Turner, Trek World Racing, Giant, and then latterly Polygon United Ride. Like from all those teams, where would you say you felt your best? And like, what do you put that down to? Because that's a massive variety of different teams and structures and setups and support, right?
Yeah, most certainly. And the first 3 years were, more shop privateer style teams, even though I was on Global doing my own thing. But maybe when you get into the factory ride, I would say support and professionalism was Trek. Getting on Trek was a good time for me. I'd come off a bike that was, honestly, I can say it now, just subpar of shit. It had a design flaw, and nothing personal against the guys that designed it. Like, it worked on some tracks, but it just couldn't work. It was a URT style rear triangle. I mean, just didn't work. So to get on Trek and what they were doing with that bike at the time, I mean, they took us to a wind tunnel. Just think about that. Think about the money they put in. So that was really good at a good time. But with that comes pressure. And I don't know if I've told Martin, but riding for Martin, depending on the rider, brings even more pressure because of how successful he is and running a great program. And even him being at the races, like, he's not intentionally doing it. And it's just like the way maybe I took it on incorrectly, I was like, shit, I want to perform for this team. I think it was more like Trek Factory, actually. But I'm just saying, like, when you have someone that's successful putting the team together, then you've got Trek. You see what they're putting into the bikes. So that was really good from a professional side. But I said, like, I think feeling the most comfortable was when I got on Giant.
Okay.
Like with the structure and the people I knew there, like, that was a touch more relaxed atmosphere. And I think it showed through, like, I got my first podium with Trek. Took a little longer than some would expect on paper. Lots of good qualities, lots of potential, showing speed. Got in my own way a little bit. Had a bad bike for some years. And then Giant, I had 4 good years with Giant, and we had some good time. I had good times with all of them. Like, they're all pros and cons to all the teams, really.
For sure, yeah. And when you're racing well, then what would you say are the key like elements to that recipe for you? And has that changed over your career?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to give myself advice if I went back, it wouldn't be train harder or be more dedicated. Like, I think I ticked that box pretty well. I think I would try, I don't know how though, because racing is a pressure-filled environment, but like to try take myself less seriously. Try trust the process more, which will then potentially help with the outcomes. But for me, myself, like, my personality is quite extroverted. So for me, having a good time and being a happy rider is a fast rider. Greg has his way of approaching things. I have mine. Loic has his, and maybe learning what made me tick earlier would have been really good. But I mean, I kind of did that mostly. And some teams, they didn't understand it. They don't understand that after quali, I might go shit talk with Brendan or ride around the pits. Like, I needed to relieve that stress. I needed to be out there. I didn't need to be in my bubble overthinking things. But that sometimes looks like a rider is not serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it does not, it certainly looks like he's not being serious. If he's not watching his GoPro and he's not, but each rider's so different. So yeah, fascinating question to look back at.
Do you think teams are getting better at like understanding what their athletes need? Like that appreciation of the fact that everyone's different, the recipe's not the same. Do you think that's becoming more understood? Well,
I think that yes and no. Because watching the race tapes? Have you watched the series yet? Or
I haven't seen all of it. I've seen a couple of them, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to... Look, it's a show again. So they've made the project about the Trek XC team. And Matt guy, I got all respect for him. I'm not down-talking this, but I'm looking at it going, okay, they want to do this team lap, which I know by the end of it works. But you've got all these individuals doing an individual sport. It isn't actually road racing.
Yeah.
Now, I like his method of it, but it is a catch-22 to put everyone into a box as a team. You know, and it's tough. So I think teams are doing a lot better job of it, and it is a team because you've got to travel them for 6 months, and you want to try have a culture where what he's trying to do is, you know, if you're rooting for your teammate and he does better, it can bring you up, and if you do better, he's going to do better, and the team will do better. I do agree with the overall message, and as you said, the challenge is we've got all these individuals, all these different personality types. So because one guy needs to warm up for 15 minutes and he needs to do it exactly like this, but then the other guy, but if he's not doing that, then he's not going to perform. You know, it's not one size fits all from a team manager point down is what I'm trying to say. It's a really, but then also you don't want 6 prima donnas on the team.
Ideally, no.
Ideally not. And for me to sit here and not say that I had prima donna tendencies, or I wanted a special tire, or I threw my toys out the cot because they didn't have 3 backup tires of my choice. I'm thinking, you know what would have been better is to give less shits. That would have done me better, because if I was a privateer and I tread on the tire, good. Let's go smash it, because I had to prove something, right?
Yeah, feels like some of the most successful racers have managed to bring that to the top level, right? Like Rat Boy, I guess, is a good example of a sort of run what you brung. I'll just get on it and ride it, and all that stress therefore is gone, right? You just focus on getting down the hill fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole ignorance of bliss versus someone that's so experienced and knowledgeable, and it comes out with Greg, right? He really knows what he needs. He knows what he's had in the past to perform. So how do you not want to rely on that package? If you know when you're on this bike and it felt like this is when I did well. So the experience can also be a disservice to someone like that. And I think you brought up a good point. Rat Boy, that's personality. Yeah. Dude, he didn't shower at some of the races for days. That's just like, I was like, Rat Boy, I don't understand. Like when I take a shower, I feel 40% more energy in my body. But, you know, he's just YOLO. I mean, I would love to be like that. And that's why I loved hanging out with Brendan and Rennie. Some of the most lessons in my career I probably learned from Rennie on what to give a shit about. Yeah.
Yeah, give us some of that. I was going to ask, like, from teammates who you've learned the most from, but from riders in general that you've had the ability to hang out with and ride with and work with. Like, obviously Rennie's a standout for you. What sort of stuff do you take away from Nathan?
Yeah, from Rennie, just looking back, I got a lot of respect for Rennie. And he had this amazing ability to really not take himself too seriously, to self-deprecate himself, and also what really matters. But he was really hardworking and also analytical. And he's the one that he's famous for saying, like, your practice, all you're doing is getting your exact plan for the race run, and that what gear you start in, where you break in. You know, you think he was just riding down the track as fast as humanly possible, but, you know, he teaches you that you're just getting in information so that you can be as planned as you can for the race. But I really liked his carefree attitude, because I overthink things. Same as Brendan. Brendan, he'd be like, why are you... I think he was teammates with Troy, and I was similar. I was like, if I make the decision the night before, then it's less decisions to make on the day. So pack out my kit and, it's going to rain here. Get my race goggles ready and my roll-off goggles. I mean, that was not like Brendan. And I think you can take certain traits from other people if they're getting in your way, you know?
Yeah, good to have examples from people on the opposite end of the spectrum from you, I guess, because it's good to find that balance, right? We all sit somewhere on a spectrum on all these different things, and it's nice to be able to move along that sometimes. I'm the same as you. I'm an overthinker, right? Like, and that can be the death of me sometimes. So seeing people that are like, be fine, just ride, like, it's refreshing.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It is refreshing, and you've got to be true to yourself. But so you like that as well. You have a plan and you like to be organized. And I saw when we were planning the podcast, you've got your, like we've committed on WhatsApp, but you're like, okay, I'm going to send you the invite because that's how you structure probably through your email box. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Cool. And as soon as I change the time, you change that. And that's how you probably get out of your own head.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Definitely, man. So as well as riding with Rennie and many other people throughout your career, you also had a chance to go riding with Travis Pastrana. I'm keen to hear a bit about that, but I think you've forgotten some of it.
I was going to say, do you want the part that I remember or the part that I forgot?
Let's have both.
So we're on Giant and we're in Whistler. I was quite lucky. All the teams I was on went to Whistler. So that place is, as many listeners will either know or want to know, it is incredible. It's cool. And then I was doing the Crankworks commentary. I got to go back all the time as well. So that was cool. So Travis Chipres, who was a really big help to me in the industry, he did my contract at Mongoose, actually, funny enough. And back then, he had connections with Pastrana. He'd always float him bikes and helped him. I think even then. Then he moved over to Giant. And Travis was coming up and he says, hey guys, so we'd heard rumors that Pastrana was maybe going to come to Crankworks. Didn't think much of it. Then we get there and Travis says, hey, you riders, the dinner's booked for 8 o'clock tonight. Don't be late. Someone might join us. I'm thinking, no ways. No ways. And lo and behold, we sit down to dinner. I don't know if Bailey was one of the mechanics on site. I don't know if Colin Bailey was there with us. I forget who. And then I think Danny and Marcelo, maybe whoever's at that time on the team. We sit down with Travis Pastrana and his wife and Chipres. And super casual dinner, having beers, talking very openly. Yeah, it was really special, And then at that dinner, it's sort of, okay, you guys going riding tomorrow? Oh, sure. And I'd heard... He's been there before and he rode with Ben Reed once. Uh-huh. And I'd heard him say they'd stop and then Ben was like, oh, how was that section over the roots? And Pastrana said, you guys are crazy. Reed's like, what are you talking about? I was like, you guys jumped all those roots. How do you... And you're thinking, wow, this guy's just one of us, like a mountain bike, And off we go. So we plan to meet at the lift and he gets a bike from Giant. I forget. It was just myself, another rider, and Pastrana, and maybe someone else. I don't really know. We had a whole morning of riding. Cool. He's, as you know, he's like he is on all the videos, super down to earth. We had a great time, and we break for lunch, and he's like, "I'm gonna go for lunch, see where my wife is," and that was awesome. Thanks so much. You guys are crazy. We're like, that is the most ridiculous thing to come out of your mouth. Like. You're literally the godfather of, extreme sports. Okay, no problem. I've got A-line practice. And, off I go. And I think why I was so cocky was probably a good morning with Pastrana, and I'd won the race the year before. So I was super confident, had a good bike set up, and, that was going to be a goal, is to sort of repeat. And... no, I got bucked on one of these fast jumps on A-line. To give you an idea that, the jumps are built amazingly well, but when you're at race speed, they're going to be more kicky, and I just got one wrong. Huge crash. Luckily, I wasn't injured any worse, but I definitely got a concussion and knocked my head pretty well. I had to go get scans at the hospital. And, I was pretty out of it. Don't think I went to dinner that night. I had to recover. And then the next morning... Danny's, how you doing? And dude, I can't believe you rode with Pastrana. I was like, I did what? I rode with who? You rode with Pastrana. And I just didn't have any short-term memory at that time. So it's funny now. It's quite dangerous. I was like, you're kidding me. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, so where were we last week? No, you're in Mount St. Anne. I was like, oh, cool. How did I do? Yeah, I don't know. You were maybe in the top 10, but you qualified third or second. I don't know what I qualified. I was like, I wouldn't even believe him because I hadn't qualified that well, ever. I think like the previous best was fourth. And he's like, no, you qualified second in the rain or third. I don't know. I wouldn't believe it. Yeah, it was so it's funny now. And but it was cool. So we go to dinner the second night. Pastrana's there and that whole Nitro Circus crew. And he comes over. He's like, hey, I heard you had a crash. are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, no, I'm all right. And I still didn't remember much of this ride. I'm thinking, what a waste. You get to ride with a guy like this and you go and crash afterwards. It's mostly come back now. And then we go to the bar, and obviously I'm not going to drink because I'm like, that's obviously a dangerous idea. But I'm not going to miss the opportunity when he says, hey, we're going to go shoot some pool at the Longhorn. The crew's going out. So off we go, and we're shooting a bit of pool. And he comes over, and I was trying to be funny, and he goes, yeah, so you don't remember much? And I was like, yeah, not a lot. He goes, yeah, and you were trying to pick up my wife as well at dinner. And I was like, luckily I switched on, and I said, do you blame me? Now he's taking it back. He's like, what? I said, well, you married her, she's successful, and she's pretty. I mean, do you blame me? So then he was stumped, So I had enough wit to go back at him. But yeah, fond memory now that I kind of do remember it a bit.
Yeah, amazing experience. Throughout your career, I guess, like there's been one very constant presence, and that's Greg Minnaar, who's had like insane success over the years. And I guess he's kind of earned that crown of being like the South African rider that all the fans know. And I guess this kind of sounds bad, but it's sort of left you as like the other South African rider for a good chunk of your career, even though there was like podiums, lots of promise, lots of success. Like, did you personally feel that? And like, was that hard to deal with?
What, being the bridesmaid my whole career?
Being the bridesmaid to Greg, yeah.
I mean, not really, because at the end of the day, luckily he was that good. He's the GOAT, So I think I was able to just reflect like, okay, you're getting smoked by the guy that's the best in the world. So even the second in the world is playing bridesmaid to the guy a lot of the time. And it's all earned. I got utmost respect to Greg. I would think in the beginning it was a little bit of competition, me coming up. Like, we didn't share lines in the beginning. We didn't do any of that sort of stuff. I was probably the little kid coming up. But I think later in the career it was really cool. And especially now that I'm done, I've got a good relationship with him. And yeah, I mean, it was always going to be tough. You're doing as good as you can, but you're not getting the awards in South Africa because there's always someone better than you. You're always going to be the second best downhiller when he's riding. But as I said, he's still going. So everyone's played a little bit of bridesmaid to him at some stage, unless you won the overall that year. But if he's winning world champs and he's winning World Cups, yeah, definitely maybe could have got more accolades at home or some sponsors here. I mean, what does it matter now? So no, I don't think there was too much resentment, because what can you do?
Yeah, that's an amazing way to look at it. It's hard sometimes to step back and take that perspective. But like, yeah, when you're losing to someone who's beating everyone week in, week out, that's not such a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, and then if you do go and beat him, then, there's that mutual respect that builds, and it's fair and square. Then you can be pretty proud of yourself, which, look, to be honest, it didn't happen that much at a World Cup level, but didn't happen that much for a lot of riders. So, yeah, I was able to get one over him at some big races, and that's something I can be proud of,
100%, man. And we've got a new South African coming in. I might get the name pronunciation wrong, but I'm sure you can correct me. Theo Elangzen. Has it been fun seeing him getting involved and seeing the banter between him and Greg as well? There's been a bit of friendly rivalry there. Yeah,
Theo. I mean, Greg and I have had to bail him out of some shit. But yeah, I mean, to me, Theo, I wish he'd focus on one thing. Like, I think he's got an ungodly amount of talent. He's a fast rider. Obviously, he's enjoying Darkfest. And, I think it's just, with what social media is doing now on building your brand, that's his choice what to focus on. And it's to his personality. So I can't fault it. But if I was to get my way with him and he would actually listen, like I thought he could have quite a career in downhill on a team, But then again, if he's having a good time and he's successful at Darkfest and doing it his way, like, I can't fault that. But he is a big talent. I don't want his head to get any bigger than it is. But he's a really good bike rider, really good bike handler. He really is. And he's fast. Like, like the the speed and rawness he has on a downhill bike is impressive.
Yeah, for sure. And these younger riders coming through, like, I think we've got this first generation that have spent their entire lifetime on incredible bikes and kit that older riders like us didn't have. We started on pretty shonky stuff, so they've been riding incredibly fast from a very young age. Do you think it's changing the sport? Like, I think we saw glimmers of it last year with Jackson and Jordan entering the elite ranks and taking victories straight away, and just in certain cases looking on another level and riding in such a fun to watch and like incredible style down the track. Like, do you think it's going to be harder and harder for the older riders to challenge that younger upcoming group?
I mean, it certainly is sort of narrowing the gap from someone at a junior level. And I think you might have thought the same as me. We've seen the times, right? They could do the same times, if not faster. Okay, they did it 3 hours earlier as a junior. So you think the speed's there, the potential's there. What impresses me is doing that in the elite level so quickly. Now, I know Jordan winning the first one, he didn't expect to, so there wasn't a lot of pressure. And you could see what the expectation, the pressure, okay, it made it a little harder. But Jackson, it's just so impressive that they're able to do it straight off the bat with what I would think is some pressure. But maybe they're not feeling it because they know they've got more years to come. That certainly seems what Jackson's doing. But as far as a talent speed level, man, it's impressive. It really is impressive. And that's where the top guys have to up their game. And that's where experience comes through. And someone like Loic, there's a long season. And he's able to be patient and strike when he's riding at his best. And maybe not strike when he knows the track doesn't suit him or he's not feeling his best. So, yeah, I think it is going to be harder and harder. And there's more of these juniors. Now, the next level of juniors, if they have the talent, are they not going to believe that they can also do it if they've seen Jackson doing it? We're seeing it in other sports.
Yeah, for sure.
If you see someone before you winning, does it create more pressure or does it make you believe in yourself more that you potentially could be capable of doing that?
Yeah, no, it's going to be exciting for sure. And with all these new riders entering the sport, there's this older generation that have to make that decision some point. Like, when do they step back? You took that call in 2017, I think. You kind of moved away from World Cup racing. That a hard decision to make?
Yeah, I think for any athlete, it really is super challenging to make the call when to do it. Sometimes it's nicer when it sort of gets forced on you, I think. But there's a certain tough process moving forward. So for myself, maybe I overthink things, and I kind of always knew it was going to come to an end, but you never really planned for that exact day to happen. And then going into after 2016 might be the last year that I was on the circuit. I didn't really know doing the last race that it would be my last year, and I'd had an injury the year before, and I felt that I was riding at my highest level, just not having much luck and some issues with the bikes, and then I get injured. And then I'd never really come back from an injury that took me out of more than a race or sitting out for one race in a season. So touch wood, I'd been pretty lucky. And it took me a while to get back up to speed, and that's tough for your confidence. And I think when you're older, it's going to take you longer for your body as well as for your mind. So I didn't really know at the time, but then going into off-season, I'd made the call. I'd been away from home too much, living out of bags. I kind of wanted to find a team that I was happy with. Bike was good, didn't really care about the paycheck. Good teammates, bike. And I was thinking Scott could be that team because Brendan was on that. And I thought, oh, what better way to do it, And I wanted to fly home, even on my own dime, in between races more.
Yeah.
Because I think, guys from UK, Europe, I think they've got an advantage as the season drags on. I really do. And you can see it in the results. Some of these guys that are away from home for too long, it gets a bit of a problem 3/4 of the way the season. So for me, I go in the off season and it was crickets. There was a few options here or there. And I've spoken about before. I even chatted to my dad because he was around at that time. He passed only just after that. And he said, well, why don't you just self-fund it? Like, you've been smart with your money and you've invested and you didn't piss it all away. I said, well, I think there's a problem here because it's not just the money. Like, gut-wise, I'm not quite sure. And also, I don't think the return on investment's a smart idea. I'm going to do a year I don't know if they're going to pick me up on a factory ride again, even after that. So yeah, I started chatting to a few teams, and then there was this opportunity for this ambassador thing with Scott, and it was kind of the universe sort of giving me the decision.
Okay.
In my gut, I wasn't sure I wanted to hurtle down the hill anymore, and the pressure was getting to me. And I'm like, okay, well, whether I retire at 32, I retire at 35, I was never going to get to 40 like Greg, or 42, or however old he is. Because it's easier, you know, once you've won a bunch of races, like when you're not so good, you're still on the podium. When you're not so good after that, you're in the top 10. I was like, really good race, I could get on the podium. Average, I'd be in the top 10. But if I start not being average, you know, I'm 15th, I'm 20th, like no one wants to pay you. And whatever, those younger kids should get the wage anyway. So yeah, I made the decision, and luckily had another option. I just kind of reflected, like, if we have this chat now, do you care if I went till 32 or 35? Like, does my mom care? like no one really cares. And I don't think it means that much to me, you know. So, but it was hard, man. Super difficult. I think walking away from a career is one of the hardest things a sportsman has to do, is retire. It really is still a mental juggling act to figure out. It's still very tough. Still so tough.
A career that involves a lot of adrenaline, right? There's a lot of adrenaline around the race, and that becomes something your body is used to and enjoys, I guess. And then suddenly that's not there, right? I think we see it a lot with athletes, certainly extreme sports athletes, like falling into drugs and things like that, and finding other ways to like get a kick. Has it been a real sort of struggle to find ways to make life feel exciting for you?
I think so. I've probably, from the outside, it looks really good. As I said, it is a struggle. I was lucky to put proposals together and get backing from Scott and go straight into an ambassadorship, and as well as Crankworks asking me, even while I was still racing, to commentate. And I love commentary. I really feel in another world. That was what I was maybe born to do. And I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I really enjoy it. That's what I mean. Like, I enjoy it like I enjoyed racing down a hill. So luckily I had that to sort of bite my teeth into. Okay, I got to learn this new industry. I got to learn what to prep and how to do it. And you go live, right? It's like a race run, and they count down. As you know, probably now you're the host, so when it goes 5-4, you get a bit nervous. Yeah. On these podcasts. So I had that to sort of maybe distract myself and mask it for a bit, but it's always going to come back to haunt you and eat you. Is you're right. Yeah, I was going to some of these races, going, dude, I would smoke these guys. Like, not the top guys, but I was like, hey, this guy's still getting a wage. Like, I put me on a bike now because I still felt like I could do it or wanted to do it. And that took a few years for me now. When I'm on the side of the track, or we hang out at Leger when we saw each other, dude, I'm happy as Larry to be on the side of the tape. I don't want to be in there. It's now that I'm so far withdrawn. But back to your point, I don't think it gets spoken about enough, because there's sort of a grieving period you got to go through. You've lost a part of yourself. To say that you shouldn't identify with what you do as work, I mean, that's easier said than done. I did downhill since I was, at a pretty high level of racing since I was 15, and pro since I was 18. That's all I know. That's my skill set. Yeah. I'm a downhiller. I go to the pub at home. Oh, you're that crazy downhiller. Like, of course it stokes the ego. You'd be lying if it didn't. So yeah, there's adrenaline. But you know what I miss the most is probably the single-minded focus on one objective. Yeah. You wake up, you do your training, you do your work on your mental, you ride. It's all to get better for one thing. Then when you move away, you've obviously got to earn income. That's one thing. But it's like, okay, so what do I focus on? Okay, I got this ambassador thing. Okay, but they're asking me to commentary. Someone decides it's a good idea to open a bike shop. So I do that with my brother and another partner. I got the trails. I'm like, okay. So you're sort of desperate. You just throw a bunch of shit to the wall, see what's going to stick. Then you got to figure out what to work on and how hard. But I can see it, man. I was listening to a lot of Lance Armstrong stuff now. Like, he's showing a lot of humility, with what he's gone through. And I'm not condoning cheating or doping, and he doesn't really either at this stage. He's pretty honest about it. But you've seen those guys like roadies, because I think they're dealing with that weird physical high that they go into with the tour.
Yeah.
And they chase that with cocaine and other bullshit. And dude, there's guys that had overdoses. So it's pretty gnarly. And I don't think it's spoken enough about. And there's no support structure. Like you've lost a part of yourself. Then you've got to earn money. Well, you don't have a skill set. Like, hey, can you pay me for riding a bike well? No, we did pay you for riding a bike well. Now you're deciding you're not going to do that. So what's your skill set? It's
tough, because there's not like endless roles within the industry or in the media for people to step into. And there's no obvious, not necessarily an obvious career path there. I think there are a few riders that, you see them do bits of commentary here and there, and you can see how that can be a future thing for them. But for most people, that's not the case, is it? There's not anything sat there waiting for them.
That's a good point. There's no roadmap. There's not a lot of options. Luckily with the internet and testing, and as you said before we came on, I said, I'm lucky to do this. You said, but you've earned it. So I have to keep hearing that, because I don't have an ambassadorship by luck. I'm grateful and honored to do it, but it's because of a proposal and ideas I put together, and because of 20 years of excelling in my craft. But there's no roadmap for everyone, because not everyone is going to excel at being an ambassador. Not everyone can hop in the commentary booth. Not everyone maybe can do a podcast. And because you've got to find something you kind of want to do and then sustain that. And normally that's because there's a certain passion or carrot there for you. And it can't just be money, right? We didn't start racing downhill for money.
No.
You started racing downhill because you love the challenge and you love being on your bike. So that is a challenge. You're right. There isn't a roadmap. There's not a big support structure. Some people are not smart enough with their money. So as soon as they finish sport, they have to take a certain job out of desperation. So they haven't bought themselves enough freedom to make a decision that's maybe better for them in the long run.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't envy people retiring. And you see it in all walks of life and stuff. It comes up a lot. I like the topic. That's kind of half of my podcast. I like speaking to people that have retired. What are you doing? How do you cope with it? I went to a chat the other day, and in our country, actually yours as well, like rugby is like, you're a superstar if you play for rugby. And like, South Africa, I don't want to boast, but we're like probably the best team because we win the World Cup all the time. But anyway, I didn't do anything. I'm just lucky to be born in South Africa. But what I mean is, this guy's still got jobs, and people, he's like working for a wealth company doing philanthropy, but it's because he was a rugby player, because he's like an icon. And everyone was asking about the Rugby World Cup and the locker room stuff, which is super interesting. And I said at the end, you're 8 years out of being a pro sportsman. How challenging was it, and what have you been doing to cope? And the room kind of went, shit. It went quiet. And then he said, great question, because I don't think enough people ask him, how is he coping with that challenge? Now he's home on the weekends. Yeah, he wants to see his family more, but he doesn't have that adrenaline, that rush, and he's got to fill that void. Yeah,
it's a tricky one for sure. And unless you've got good kind of mentors and good people around you, it can be pretty tough for riders, I think. Like you say, there's never been in the sport any kind of sort of structure to help riders in their career, right? Some people are lucky they've got a good manager or a good mentor, but it's not always the case.
No, it's not always the case. And anyone listening that's gone through it or whatever, like reach out. Like I think we should normalize how difficult it is. We should normalize. People think, oh, you got your shit together. Yeah, I do, but it's a constant work to work on it. Like if I don't have projects, I don't feel like I'm doing my work. So then I feel that I'm not adding value, and that doesn't make you feel good as a person as well. Even though I've got a lot going on, there'll be quiet periods. So it's certainly tough. And yeah, like I say, my door is always open because I enjoy the topic. And if I can add any value to someone's life or ask them questions that might get them further down the road to making a decision what to do, like what will fulfill them, you know. I'm always open to chat about that. And yeah, it's a fascinating topic and not spoken about enough. So thanks for bringing it up.
No, it's a pleasure, man.
And I'm not looking for sympathy. Definitely not.
That's all good, man. It's all good. And I mean, you've made talking about some of this stuff part of your like ongoing career, right? You started the podcast with Moving the Needle. Tell us a bit about that. Like, where does the drive come from for that, and how are you enjoying it?
I have enjoyed it. It's an idea I had a long time ago, probably before you started yours, that I even know mountain biking podcasts exist, because I just really listen to a lot of business podcasts and self-help and, you know, the Rogans and all that stuff. When I was on the road, you got so much time. And some people listen to music, and that's great. But I listen more to podcasts and audiobooks. And it was COVID, and then Davey at the time was Hooked Podcast, now Ride Companion, had me on his, and he said, "Oh, you know, you've got these connections and all this insight. Why don't you start a podcast?" I was like, "Shit, you know, I've had the idea for 10 years. I just haven't committed. Haven't done it." So long story short, we started in COVID, and my goal is probably as yours. Like, to me, the stories of the riders haven't been told on a long form format, and or bringing up topics that are challenging to speak about. All those songs sort of came idea, as well as connecting with people that I haven't spoken to for a while, like a Rennie.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't phone Rennie and have a 3-hour conversation, but I have done that because the podcast did that, or EC.
Yeah.
And I had a cool chat with Nigel Page. It's coming out soon. I thought, man, he's an awesome character, and he's done so much for the sport, and he was always so positive to me on the race circuit. But for sure as shit, we haven't spoken for 2 hours all in one go, you know. So it's kind of a selfish excuse to reconnect, but then hopefully add value to some people. That's where the podcast was, as well as the commentary thing. You know, I was doing a lot more. Things have changed now with Crankworks changing their broadcast team, and obviously the huge news of Discovery and all that, changing that. And I've only really been doing world champs.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I love watching the racing. I'm analytical, probably like you are. So I'm going to talk about it to you in passing, or my brother on the couch when we're watching. So I was like, well, might as well be a guy on the couch shouting at the TV and giving opinions about shit, you know?
Definitely, man. So yeah, come on then. You're like super embedded in the sport. In your mind, who should we be keeping an eye on this season across the different disciplines, different categories?
Shucks.
It's a tricky question, eh?
You hit me just before I've done my prep for the season coming up. You might have started yours.
No, honestly, I haven't yet. Actually,
I
was
so
like,
if
I ask him this, he's going to ask me, who do I think? But
you're like a
tricky.
dangerous question because it's coming back. Shucks. So enjoyed watching some of the race tapes because it's kind of rejarring my memory. I don't know if you have this. I'll make notes. I'll do the review podcast, and you ask me 2 weeks later who won the race. I'm like,
that's age, mate. That's age.
Yeah, it's an age. Okay,
it gets worse.
I'll use that excuse. But you asked me who won it in 2010 at this venue, I'm probably going to be better. Yeah, it's the age. But I was super interested to see Jackson this year, but now we're obviously not going to see him because of the knee injury.
Feels like
but
that.
To me, to that first year, there's a lot less expectations. But now if you get second with a flat tire in Andorra,
mm-hmm.
I mean, only one way is up. You know, everything else is certainly going to feel like you went a little bit backwards. And he even said that, you know, from here, I've got to probably aim a little bit higher. So now you got the expectations of potential and overall. You won 2 races. What's the next goal? It's an overall. So you start the first race thinking about the overall. That's probably a little bit tough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. As far as like at the top pointy end, like Amory's had such shit luck. You know, he seems healthy and strong, right? Like I say, I haven't deep dived into all the top riders, but I think hopefully Amory's going to be back.
Yeah.
Loic's going to be strong. You know, who's a question mark every year is like Loris. Like, is it because we all just think he's so talented that we all just put this expectation on him? And downhill racing is so difficult to get it good and get it consistent.
Yeah. often the fastest rider on track in practice, or at least looking the fastest rider. He's so talented on a bike, but and he's led the overall, right? But it just doesn't quite seem to come together for him in a season yet.
No, and it's I say it about Gwyn. Like, Gwyn's a victim of his own success. When you're so good, you can't, not even allowed to get second anymore. Like, it's kind of unfair, but we're bench race pundits now, so we get to just say what everyone is thinking, you know? Oh, what happened? And maybe that happens with Loris as well. He is so talented. You expect so much from him. But downhill doesn't work like that. You don't win a downhill race on paper.
Yeah.
And you don't, it's not in like tennis where you got 5 sets. So if you have a problem in the first 2 sets, like the cream will rise to the top. Maybe in downhill by the end of the season, the cream will rise, but not in a race, right? Like you could, you know, if you're not quite on your game. But did you see how well Ethan did at that pre-race?
I was going to say Ethan, like we saw that Monson
cool.
and run, and then we saw him beat Loic and Loris at that early season race by a fairly healthy margin on a short track as well. So, and he's very analytical, very process orientated, very like he's got an older head on his shoulders, I think. So that would be interesting.
That'd be very interesting. You know, I haven't got to know him too well, but this year probably a little bit better if I sneak to some of the races and he's obviously under the Scott tent. I'd have to literally pick the overall, and then we'd look through the top 20 riders plus some guys that got injured. Like, how difficult is it this day and age to pick sort of race winners? Andy Cole, he's coming into his own.
Yeah.
Charlie Hatton, okay, so he's done the World Champs jersey. He's kind of now had the curse, breaking himself. So like, okay, so can he bounce back? And then obviously Greg Minnaar, like, how fired up is he to go out the way he wants to go out now? You know, that's what he needs. He needs this underdog. He's got this new bike. I like when people go to a new bike because I know from myself, it forces you to ride downhill more. It forces you to get in tune with the bike. If you've got a bike for the last 10 years, you can test and you can tweak, but I sometimes maybe you go through the motions a bit. But you got a new bike. You got to, you know, I think you're forced to really do some good work on it. And I'm just speaking from my personal experience.
Yeah.
Is when you change teams is like an added motivation. It's like going on a holiday.
Yeah. And you know Greg will put the work in, right? That's Greg.
Yeah. So who are we missing? Who you now that like we need to be honest with our listeners. We haven't done our prep yet because this is just a podcast not about the full race season, but
I'm intrigued to see how Benoit gets on. I think like that breakthrough result has been a while coming, and then often the confidence that comes from that drives through. I think Dakota Norton on that new Mondraker is not hanging about.
That's a great point.
And Ronan, to be fair as well.
Ronan and Dakota are going to be pretty dangerous this year.
Yeah.
Dakota,
Ronan's hardline performance was pretty insane on the old bike, which he said himself is not as fast as the new bike as well.
True. Yeah, Ronan, super excited to see that. That's one of these younger crop of riders where, you know, it's kind of reminds me of Danny back in the day. And speaking of that, so Dakota, I had a fascinating chat to him, and I think this is just giving him more self-belief, which he's probably battled with, he said in the past. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he now knows he deserves to be there. He firmly believes it. And the factory support's going to be good. Then Danny Hart, is he going to have a chip on his shoulder? Because just with the industry cycle and where we are, he's moved on from his old team. But the bike's proven because Ethan had a great race on it. So that's actually really good for him. Yeah. So we literally have to bring up the list and we could go through it. But it's going to be exciting. It really is. There's lots of stories going into this off season. A lot of team changes. Literally out of left field. Like Greg's not on Santa Cruz. Like that, you couldn't have guessed that. Where in previous years, it's like, okay, 2 people have changed teams. Like, okay, well, you know, what are we talking about here?
No, it's exciting.
When are we going to see him back? I don't think Gwyn's back at the first race. There's no way.
He's
I don't think he's strong enough.
He is back on a downhill bike, but agree. I don't know whether he'll be race ready or not yet, but that would be cool to see. What about in the women's field, right? Because that's also like getting deeper and deeper with talent.
Yeah, and the juniors are getting more comfortable. Like Phoebe's sort of pushing on. Gracie Hemsworth, that's going to be so impressive. Miriam's hopefully going to be strong again and not have any issues. Although, didn't she hurt herself in Queenstown again?
Yeah, I think she's done a thumb,
Hand,
like maybe
thumb?
a skier's thumb or something like that.
Yeah,
But
okay. So she
hopefully
can
ready
bounce
for the
back from
season.
that. Yeah, it's going to be super interesting. Yeah, the women's field, I just don't know if we're losing some of them with this 10-rider final. That's a bit of a challenge for me.
Yeah.
But the women's field, Cami, I mean, Valley's so dominant. Like if we can get everyone fit, I mean, you're gonna be so stoked because you can't really call it as well.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. Louise Ferguson on a new bike with a bit more support as well, like super talented rider to go up against like Gracie and Phoebe. Phoebe's been looking fast in every sort of clip I've seen in the off season as well. Like I could see her having some good results this year. Well, not that she hasn't already had some good results, but some more podium stuff.
The more comfortable you get in the elite ranks. And with Tane, you can sort of see her really growing up as a rider and what her role is in the industry. And I would think she's very supportive of Phoebe. It certainly seems that way.
Yeah, I get that impression.
So that's a really good thing. I don't know if there's crazy competition there. I could be wrong, but I think that's really good for Phoebe, getting taken under the wing and feeling accepted there. So she's going to be super, super good. And then Valley going back to YT, kind of like a homecoming thing. I didn't understand their launch. What was the was there a goat on the beer or some animal on the beer and then they drank? Like I didn't, maybe I'm old. I don't know. Did you? I don't know what the point was.
I think
it was like the weirdest launch video ever. I
think they just like to throw things out there, don't they? And like stand out from the crowd. They've done it in the past with Christopher Walken in I think it was the Jeff C campaign, and like, they just
to be different.
Want to be different, right? Which I think that's cool. I think there's a place for that.
I don't know what the context was, so someone needs to tell me I'm old and didn't catch it. No, I respect the brand. It's cool. Those guys kill it, and that's interesting that they've got her coming back and then rebuilding that factory team. So that's going to be pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just so. I mean, who are we missing? Like Bernard Kerr, is this his last hurrah? How he's been putting the work in. So you got that.
Ocean.
There's so many. We're obviously missing a few.
Yeah, Ocean we haven't mentioned.
Yeah. Geez, breakout win as well. What does that do for confidence? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't wait. It's going to be a good season, dude. Well, we should.
Where do we watch it on?
Good question. I think we have.
Okay, so you don't even know.
I think we have to get Discovery Plus in the UK. I don't know if that's the same for you guys.
True. So I got to research what exists here on a streaming platform that'll definitely have it.
Yeah. I think it's probably Discovery Plus or Max or something like that. And then I think it was the Australia and New Zealand distribution hadn't been sorted out last time I heard. But they were hoping to have something in place for the first race. But yeah, I don't know yet. We'll work that out. There's always a way, right?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time. We've got a month. Less than a month looking at the date. Racing's happening less than a month. That's cool, eh?
It's coming round. Yeah, it's been a long off season, man. Well, we should start wrapping up. We've got our final 4 questions that we've asked many people over the years, so we'll hit those. The first one is if you had £150, which I think is 3,500 rand, to improve your performance on a bike, what would you recommend people go spend that on?
Shucks, I've heard you ask this. I didn't prep. $150 to improve their performance.
Yeah.
And what level of rider is it?
Let's just say
generic question, I guess.
Yeah, generic, like not a high level racer, just someone who enjoys riding, might do the occasional weekend warrior at a race, but
coaching. Skills coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had much?
Unless I've seen his bike, and there's a glaring issue on the bike.
Okay. Yeah.
But if he wants to increase his performance, then I would say coaching. I don't think coaching is looked at enough in our sport. It's getting obviously more popular, but I'm talking about the everyday rider, because I've got a few hobbies and it's huge in sport of golf to go for coaching. I'm like, yeah, you need it. It's quite technical sport, but you could argue riding is getting more technical, and if you have a better technique, it's just going to help you in the long run, as well as it's safer if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, massively, man. All right, nice one. Second question, if you could wind back the clock and sit down with yourself age 16, what advice would you give him?
Invest in low-cost ETFs way sooner than I started. No. Be more outwardly appreciative of what everyone else is doing for you, because I think when you're a teenager, it comes a little later. So I was instilled really good morals and stuff from my parents, don't get me wrong, but that, and then be super focused, but don't take life too seriously, because it's all going to be done pretty soon, like the career, and if you put so much pressure on yourself, you might waste a few years.
Yeah, good advice. All right, next one. If you could have a coaching session with anyone, past or present, who would it be, and what would you want to learn from them? And again, you've had the opportunity to ride with a lot of the world's best, but where would you head?
Oh, is this mountain bike coaching?
You could pick a mountain bike one and an out of mountain bike one if you want.
No, selfishly, I want to go get a coaching lesson from a certain golf coach, but that doesn't really help your listeners. A coaching lesson? Jeez, that's a good question. Shit. Who did you pick? Who would you pick? Maybe it'll spur some
good question.
Juices in my head.
I think I've said in the past, like Nico or Fabian. I just feel like they're so analytical about what they do. Like I feel like they really understand how they perform, maybe more than some riders who are more like riding on intuition. So I think riding or having some input from either of those two would be pretty beneficial, especially for me, because I'm analytical and I like to understand kind of how I'm doing stuff. So yeah, probably one of those two.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually steal that, because Nico, when I was at that mega avalanche, he took one look at the bike and he said, your results are up and down, depending on the course. He took one look at the bike. And I was like, yeah, I'm literally, my results, I feel like I can win one day and then I cannot even get in the top 20s. Because he just, not a lot of his information has been brought to the public, right? Someone like Greg, you can understand his thinking, PD, Fabian a little bit because he's giving it on to some of the younger riders. But yeah, Nico, on mountain biking, I would spend a day with Nico at the height of my career or just before that. That would be fascinating. So yeah, I would have to steal that from you for sure.
I'll let you have that one. All right, last one. What do you do every day that you feel benefits you?
I drink my AG1.
Oh, come on. Such a podcaster.
I thought you might enjoy that.
Oh, dear.
I thought you might enjoy that. No,
I thought you were going to talk about shaving your balls.
We can, but I don't want to bastardize your brilliant hard work. No. Every day that you think benefits me. Shucks. I'd say the days that I read. Yeah, and exercise. Yeah, I would say that.
Are you a fiction or a non-fiction kind of guy when you read?
No, non-fiction, yeah.
Okay. Any particular standout like books over the last few months that you found really useful?
There's a few that are just go-tos that I would gift. I think Ego the Enemy from Ryan Holiday is a good book.
Okay.
Probably cut my career shorter. Because I was like, why am I chasing this weird thing down a hill to try and impress other people and compete with other people? Anyway, and then there's another book called Solve for Happy that I thought was a really brilliant read. I forget the author. I'll send it to you offline.
Okay, yeah.
But if you Google Solve for Happy, he should come up. Really fascinating guy. That's like a super smart guy that worked at Google X, and he sort of reverse engineered it. But it's more like his way of looking at all these different topics. So that's pretty interesting, yeah.
Cool. Nice one. I'll stick links in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've gone through a lot of them. I just think, I think it's good to sort of educate yourself. And then, health is so important. Yeah, for sure. For sure. 100%. If I can get some exercise in, it's a good day.
Definitely, man. Nice. Well, it's been a lot of fun chatting to another fellow podcaster, if people want to follow you and if they want to check out the podcast, like where are people heading?
Yeah, thanks for that, man. Yeah, so just search Moving the Needle podcast or Moving the Needle, the Andrew Neethling podcast. We're on all those platforms. I started Instagram for it as well, Moving the Needle podcast, but it mostly goes through my personal Instagram, which is at Andrew Neethling. So, yeah, if you've got any questions, just reach out. I do reply to all of them. I do my best. Depends on how many come in and if I see them, but I like engaging with it, and that's probably been the thing I'd say. Thanks to everyone that sends like a review or like takes the time to send a message. I don't know how it is with you, because they take a lot of work. So thanks for what you're doing, because you've got a hell of a lot of episodes and you're busting them out. It takes a lot of work, pre and post. So thanks for sort of pushing the mountain bike industry forward. So, and thanks to the listener. Yeah, if you had any value, see you over on my podcast as well.
Nice one. Thanks, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll stick all the links to all of that stuff so people can find it nice and easily in the show notes. But yeah, I look forward to listening to more of your episodes throughout the year, hopefully catch up with you at some of the races, and we'll no doubt have a very exciting season of racing ahead of us.
Peace, man.